You're listening to The Front Stretch on AM 590, Omaha's ESPN Radio. Brought to you by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Online at joeskarting.com.
Thank you again for joining us today here on The Front Stretch, presented by Joe's Karting. We're joined by Dr. Dean Sicking of UNL. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Sicking.
My pleasure.
We're going to talk to you today because obviously a big race coming up in a couple of hours. Dr. Sicking, you were involved in developing the safer barrier walls that IndyCar and NASCAR has implemented throughout most tracks in the United States. Can you talk to us a little bit about the process of creating the safer barriers?
This was a really weird situation. Tony George, it was his vision that brought the safer barrier about. 1998, they had a fatal crash in the early part of that year at IMS, International Motor Speedway at his track. And he decided that there had to be a better way to protect drivers during impacts with the outer wall. So he got his engineers to develop a barrier system that they thought would be effective. They made it out of high-density polyethylene. And that barrier was then put in at the inside of Turn 4 on the IMS Speedway. And they did that because they said, we never get any hard hits on that turn. And, of course, Murphy's Law struck. And I think it was the first race after they put the barrier up. They had the hardest stock car hit ever recorded, at least as far as in the 1990s, on that energy-absorbing barrier developed by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway engineers. And that was Arie Luyendyk, and he hit it at 140 miles an hour and about 35 degrees.
Man.
But he backed into it, and the wall absorbed energy, and his car absorbed energy, and he walked away. So it did a lot of good things for him. It absorbed energy and slowed him down. It did some bad things, too. It sent him back across the track at a high angle, and which is bad news if you're running a stock car race with 40 cars on the track. It's a good way to get clobbered.
Right.
But but he was on an IROC race, so there were only like 9 cars on the track, and he was running 6th or 7th, so there were only a couple cars behind him, and so no one hit him. And then the other bad thing that happened is it spread itself all across the track. So big chunks of barrier were spread out across the track, and again, you put 150-pound chunks of barrier flying across the track. They could easily be knocked into the stands by a car coming around 150 miles an hour, and a big chunk of barrier landing on a group in the stands would be the definition of a major problem for a track.
Worst case scenario kind of stuff.
And so they said, whoa, we got to take that down, and we got to call somebody that knows what they're doing. And that's how they wound up in Nebraska. And I run a lab called Midwest Roadside Safety.
Okay.
We design barriers and crash cushions and breakaway devices, all kinds of safety features for the highway.
And how long have you been doing this?
30 years. Well, 32 years come June.
And so you don't just develop this stuff for auto racing and that kind of stuff. You also develop this for everyday people.
Right. In fact, that was the focus of my work for the first 20 years that I was doing it. Mm-hmm. Focus was on highways exclusively. Then I guess in the mid-'90s, I started getting involved in high-speed test track work. So I designed the barrier that GM put on their General Motors put on their Desert Proving Ground and on their Milford Proving Ground, and I designed the barrier that Ford put up on their Desert Proving Ground. And so because I suspect because we had so much experience with these car companies designing high-speed barriers for their test tracks, that may be why they IRL came to us.
So there wasn't any kind of a competition of asking several different universities or organizations to come up with this safer barrier. They pretty much just came to you and said, hey, you guys seem to know what you're doing. Make it safe for us.
Yeah, basically they said, can you do it? They said, this is our problem. Can you solve it? I'm sort of an optimist. And I said, of course we can do that, but it's going to take at least $1 million to start the project.
When they actually came to you, kind of give us a timeline. When they came to you and said, can you do this, how long was it when they asked you if you could do this till you actually put out the finished product?
They came in October of 98, and so the first task they asked us to do was to fix their own barrier. They want to put their barrier back up, but they wanted us to design the connection so it wouldn't come apart. And so we did that for them, and it actually took a hit or two after that, and it didn't come apart. So we achieved that function. But then they said, once we did that, they said, okay, now we would like you to design us a barrier from scratch, but we want you to make it out of high-density polyethylene. And we kept trying to convince them that wasn't the way to go because with high-density polyethylene, the plastic, you get a lot of gouging. When the car gouges in, it slows down along the track. Its speed along the track a lot faster than normal. It's gouged into the plastic. And so you're reducing the accelerations laterally into the wall, but you're increasing the accelerations along the track. So you're taking away from one direction and adding to another direction, but the net is you're not making any progress.
So instead of it absorbing the energy, it's just transferring it back onto the track.
Right. It's absorbing the energy, but what it's doing is it's taking more energy out of the car than it needs to redirect it.
Oh, okay.
So, you want to basically redirect the car with as little energy loss as possible, because that'll mean you have the lowest change in velocity. Change in velocity is what kills you. It's two things. It's change in velocity and the duration of the event. So that's what they wanted us to do, was basically extend the duration of the event without changing the overall velocity loss during the impact. And that's how you make it safer. We told them right away that high-density polyethylene was not the way to go because of the inherent problem of gouging on the surface. And that was in January of '99, and it was fall of 2000 before we convinced them of it. They said, well, we don't believe you. Prove it. And so basically we had to gin up two barriers as best as we could, as identical as we could, then run a series of crash tests on both barriers, one being plastic, one being having a steel plate on the surface instead of plastic. Basically they were very similar barriers except for the gouging on the surface. And the steel barrier was able to show some positive improvement in impact performance, and the plastic barrier actually showed that it was impact was a little worse than if it had been concrete. And so once they allowed us to go to steel, we designed that barrier in about 18 months, crash tested it, and it was on the IMS track 18 months later.
Do you guys have to go through and change these walls every year, every 5 years, every 10 years? How long do these things actually last if they've never been hit? Well,
the steel will remain in place and until the track falls apart. So that's not a problem. We've hot dip galvanized these tubes. They will be there basically pristine until, for some other reason, they're taken down. But the problem is the foam energy absorbers. The original foam energy absorbers we used were basically conventional foam that you buy down at the hardware store for insulation in your house. So home insulation foam, sheets of that. And we tested over 100 different foams from all the energy absorbing foam companies, and we found that this was the insulation foam was the best foam for the problem because it was closed cell and non-friable, meaning it didn't disintegrate and turn to dust. The friable foams that turned to dust would have spread foam dust across the track, which would have led to friction problems in the corners. Potentially other cars behind the guy that first went into the wall would have followed him into the wall because they lost traction on the dust laying on the track. And then open cell foams weren't a consideration because they would absorb water when it rained, and then they leak water for hours and hours and hours across the track. And again, that would just be untenable for a racetrack to have the energy absorbers leaking water across the track surface for many hours.
Right.
So it had to be closed cell and non-friable. And the bottom line is there aren't any very efficient foams designed for those conditions. And so we wound up having to go to the building insulation foam was the best we could get. And then the government came in and, said, Dean, you did a good job. These foams are working real well, but we're going to ban them. You can't make them anymore. So go back to work and do it again.
Thanks for all of your work, Dr. Sicking, but we're going to go ahead and ban everything, and you got to start from scratch.
Yeah, exactly. So they banned the foaming agent that was used to make our foam, and so we had to go back to the starting board.
And when were you notified that they'd banned the foam?
About 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago.
Okay, and you have since developed a replacement foam?
Well, we worked with Owens Corning, and they developed the foam. I don't have the capability to develop the foam, but I could tell. We did all the testing to tell them which ones were good and which direction they needed to go to get in the right behavior. So,
okay.
And the new foam, I think it based on our tests, will perform slightly better than the old foam. So at least we're not losing any quality when we change foams. But what we don't know, the other thing we just finished when they told us they banned the foam, was we just finished a study of the durability of the foam in terms of how long it can sit out on the track before it needs to be replaced because of environmental degradation.
Mm-hmm.
And that answer was 5 years. And
that's with the old foam, right?
That was the old phone, but now we have a new phone, and we don't know what the answer is anymore.
So what you're needing to do is get out to these tracks, go down to Kansas, go to Chicago, go to Michigan, maybe even go down to Daytona this weekend, and test these foam and kind of figure out the shelf life of them, correct?
Yeah, we do things a little differently. It costs a lot for me to travel around. It's a lot cheaper for the foam to travel than for me to travel. So we basically make the tracks go get blocks of foam out of their wall and ship them to us.
But it's more fun for you to do the traveling, right?
You're saving lives. They should be paying you to go.
Well, this is by mutual agreement. I travel enough already. I don't need any more travel days on my schedule.
Oh, well, I tell you what, we'll push for Daytona to invite you, but the rest of the tracks, I mean, a guy could use a trip down to Daytona Beach, right?
I'd love to be there right now.
I'd go.
I did go to Daytona 3 times last year. We think they're going about it the right way. They bring us in whenever they have the opportunity to make major changes, and we do our best to help them.
Let's say Jeff Gordon gets into the wall of Daytona and he tears up the car. He's not injured, but the wall's damaged. There's going to be a little bit of damage to the safer wall system there. When that kind of damage occurs, do they routinely or sometimes send you a part of that wall so you can diagnose and analyze and look for maybe future improvements into the safer wall?
Well, they don't need to send us the wall because we know what that material is. We've tested it so many times. We know what they got. But what we do get is when they have an anomalous damage, then we will get a lot of pictures, and we'll decide whether we need to go look at it or not.
I have one last quick question for you, Dr. Sicking. Now, Andrew and I, we've been racing, on the dirt track level for years now, each one of us. And what I'm wondering is, a lot of times what you see in NASCAR, it may not be tomorrow, may not be next month, but sometimes a couple years down the road, what you see going on in NASCAR will translate its way down into the dirt level. 10 to 15 years out, do you think this could be something that we could see, not at all dirt tracks, but some of the bigger half miles, or have some of the dirt tracks actually expressed, their interest in something like this?
Here's the deal. We've been approached by several of the larger dirt tracks, and we analyzed the problem. We said, look, the safety barrier that's currently designed won't work for you because the cars you're driving are nearly as stiff as the NASCAR and IRL cars. And the stiffness of the barrier and the stiffness of the car have to be tuned. If your car is not stiff enough, not stiffer than the barrier, then the barrier becomes a rigid steel wall instead of a rigid concrete wall. It doesn't buy you a hell of a lot. So it takes a redesign effort. Probably not very expensive by comparison to the original development, but it isn't free. And so thus far, the dirt track owners that have come to us with this question have not been willing to put the money up to have that redesign done.
So all that means, Bud, is you're going to keep hitting concrete walls every week.
That probably explains a lot.
Well, Dr. Sicking, we really do appreciate you joining us on the front stretch. Thanks so much for your time, and enjoy your day.
My pleasure. You have a wonderful day.
And that was Dr. Dean Sicking of UNL, the designer of the safer barrier walls that NASCAR currently uses. We'll be right back to the front stretch for Turn 4 right here on AM 590, Omaha's ESPN Radio.
This is Andrew from Kaziski Auto Parts. Kaziski Auto Parts is an insurance-quality used parts supplier that can match your foreign or domestic car or truck needs. If you have a damaged or broke-down car or truck, we guarantee a clean and quality part in next-day fashion. Kaziski Auto Parts, your neighborhood premium recycled parts supplier. Call any Kaziski Auto Parts salesman today by dialing 402-731-4592 or visit us at 5040 I Street in Omaha. Kaziski Auto Parts, our quality used parts will match your car or truck's needs.
Are you ready for fast-paced, adrenaline-pumping, wheel-to-wheel racing right here in the Metro? Get to Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs and see what it's like to race real go-karts. Joe's Indoor Karting knows it's no fun to race go-karts at 10 miles an hour, so they ripped the governors out, and now the only restriction is how good you are at racing. It's full-throttle, white-knuckle racing every day of the week. Head over to joeskarting.com for hours, prices, and specials, or give Buddy a call today and set up your group races at 712-256-3075.